Hello and good evening, and welcome to the conclusion of our video tutorial series here, the four-part series on OSPF stub area types. We're going to wrap up this evening with the OSPF Totally Not-So-Stubby area. And as you can see here, I've actually decided not to do up a new slide, just to throw totally in there. So that we're going to talk about the totally not-so-stubby areas. So as a quick review, we've already discussed three other areas. The first was the stub, right? Just the OSPF stub, which did not allow, so I'll put a little X there, did not allow type 4 or type 5 or type 7 LSAs. Then we took a look at the totally stub, which said that you couldn't have type 3, type 4, or type 5 or type 7 LSAs. And in both cases here, we got automagically, we had a type 3, the single exception, a type 3 default route was automatically generated by the ABR and injected into the area for us. Then we said we wanted to introduce external routing sources. Well, to do that, we needed to have a not so stubby area, right? And the not so stubby area said that you could certainly have type 7s, right? Because we're introducing external routing information, but there were no type 4s and no type 5s that were allowed. So we did see type 3s in there, right? We had inner area summaries that did show up there, but no type 4s, no type 5s, and we were able to get type 7s. So now we're going to talk about the fourth and final. I'll put it up here, give us a little more room. Fourth and final is a totally not so stubby area. And the totally not so stubby area, very similar to the totally stub area, says no type 3s, no type 4s, and no type 5s. However, yes to type 7s, which are going to be our externals. And we all know that in the stub, the totally stub, the not so stubby, and the totally not so stubby area, that the one universal thing between all of these guys is that you are going to have your type 1s and you are going to have your type 2s, right? The router LSA and the network LSA, depending on the type of network that you've got, right? Whether it's point-to-point or multi-access. All right, so we're going to have type 7 external information is going to be allowed in the totally not so stubby area. And so what's the difference, the major difference you see here between the totally not so stubby and the not so stubby? Well, the first thing is going to be the type 3s are not allowed in the totally not so stubby, just like the totally stub, right? Now, one last yes here is going to be an automagic default route. And we're going to see that this is going to get created for us automatically. It's going to show up. All right, so let's go ahead and let's jump in. Again, this is going to be very similar, you know, going from stub to totally stub and then going from not so stubby to totally not so stubby. It's very similar. You're going to see a lot of similarities here between the two from a configuration perspective. So I'm on router 3. Let's go ahead and type show IP route. Let's see what we see so far. All right, so pretty straightforward. We have the three type 3 inner area routes, which are our OIAs. So there are the type 3 LSA advertisements that we're seeing for those routes. And then I'm seeing the 2 type 5s. And again, throughout the OSPF domain here, there is nothing is set up as a stub, a totally stub, a not so stubby, or a totally not so stubby area. It's just your multi-area OSPF vanilla right out of the jar, right? Okay, so let's go ahead now and let's take a look at our OSPF database, show IP OSPF database. And as you would expect, we see our router link states, right? Our type 1 LSAs. We see our summary network link states. Those are for the 3 inter-area routes. We see the summary ASB link state. So here's our type 4s, right? So these are the type 4 LSAs that are going to help us and provide us information about how do we get to these type 5s, right? And that's why we've got our type 4s in here. So we've got type 1s, type 3s, type 4s, and type 5s, right? Because again, this is just a vanilla multi-area OSPF setup. But now we're going to introduce stub area types. So we're going to go ahead and right out of the gate, we're going to jump in to setting router 3 and router 1 up as a totally not so stubby area. So I'm going to go into global config mode here, and we're going to go router OSPF 1, router OSPF 1, and I'm simply going to say area 1 NSSA, and let's do a question mark here. What do you think it's going to be? Just like the totally stub area, we could put that on there, right? I could say no dash summary. And again, the same sort of dilemma or argument arises. Well, you could put that, but I don't need to put that, right? I don't need to put that on the member router because R3 is not the ABR, he's just the member router. And so just like the totally stub setup where I don't have to on the member router say no summary, I can just go ahead and say area 1 NSSA, right? So it's just like going from a stub to a totally stub. On the member router, I simply stay with the same convention, area 1 NSSA. Let's transition over here to router 1. We'll go from user exec to privilege exec into global config, router OSPF 1. And if I could get OSPF spelled right here, OSPF 1. And let's go ahead and say do show IP route. What do I see right now? Well, you'll notice that I do see the 172.16, and I see it as a type 5 right now. Because remember, I'm not configured as anything right now. And in fact, it's going to go, I was waiting for it to go down. It's not going to show me anything here for that 172 because the adjacency is now down. Because remember, both routers in the area, the member router as well as the ABR. So this is just a member router. And he's going to be an ASBR, Autonomous System Boundary Router, and the ABR. So member routers and the ABR need to make sure that they have the same configuration. So let's make that happen here. So let's say area 1 NSSA. And now here is where I definitely want to put in the no dash summary. Right? So I put the no dash summary just like we did with the totally stub, and you put it on the ABR because it's the ABR who's going to be responsible for making sure that type 3 LSAs, and remember, that was the difference between the stub and the totally stub, what LSA got added in as being not injected. It was the type 3. And it's the same thing with the totally not so stubby area. Right? So not so stubby area allowed the type 3. The totally not so stubby area said no type 3s, no summary LSAs will be allowed. Right? So it is not going to allow for the summary LSAs to be injected. So I'm going to say area 1 NSSA no summary. And then we're going to see that the adjacency is going to come back up, and there we go. So now if I say do show IP route, let's see what we see here in our routing table. And take a look at that. So we have a totally not so stubby area. And what is the only OSPF route that he sees right now? So again, auto-magically he's being given a type 3 inter-area default route. And that is the only route that he's allowed to see. So again, he doesn't see the type 3, he doesn't see the type 4, he doesn't see the type 5, and let's say do show IP OSPF database, right? But he does see that type 7 LSA from the redistributed route, right? So this is why you don't see type 7 is listed there as being, he won't see the type 7. He does see the type 7, right? So let's take a look at router 1's routing table. So do show IP OSPF. Sorry about that. Database. So does he see it as a type 7? So router 1 also for area 1 sees that as a type 7. So remember, this is being redistributed from outside the OSPF domain into the OSPF domain. Therefore, it's going to be a type 7 LSA within the area of the ABR that originated this external network. And so it's a type 7 LSA there. Let me jump all the way over to router 4. And let's see what router 4 sees. And you probably already guessed it. You're absolutely right. It sees it as a type 5 because, again, in a not-so-stubby area, it's going to be a type 7 from the ASBR over to the ABR. But once the ABR gets it, he realizes, hey, this is a type 7. I'm going to flood this out as a type 5, right? So it's going to flood out as a type 5 LSA. And that's why router 4 is going to see this as a type 5 and OE2. What about router? Let's check router 5 out. Let's check them all out here. So router 5, show IP route. Yep, sees the 172 as an OE2, show IP OSPF database. And you can see he doesn't see it as a type 7, sees it as a type 5. And who's the advertising router? Who flooded it out? The ABR, the area border router, router 1, flooded out the type 5 AS link state. All right, let's check finally. We'll jump onto router 6 here, and we'll say show IP route. We'll confirm that router 6 sees it as a type 5. It does, right? And the database, show IP OSPF database. How does it see that? It sees it as a type 5, right? So that's why it shows up as an OE2. So again, the major difference between the not-so-stubby area and the totally stubby area is, the first difference is the totally not-so-stubby area does not allow type 3s, right? The not-so-stubby area does. The totally not-so-stubby area also automagically gives you a type 3 default route, right? Automatically puts it in there. Remember, with the not-so-stubby area, you don't get that default route automatically, right? You've got to put in the default information originate statement in there, right? It does not show up automatically. Okay, and one of the questions I'm often asked is, well, what about these other areas like area 2 and area 3? Can I make this one a stub? And what if I make this one an NSSA, a not-so-stubby area? Can I do that within the same domain? And the answer is absolutely. So we have here a totally not-so-stubby area, right? Let's go make area 2 a stub area. Now remember, when we make area 2 a stub area, what's going to happen? Stub area says no type 4, no type 5, no type 7. So is area 2 going to see the 172.16.100 network that gets converted, right, from a type 7 to a type 5 and flooded by router 1? Well, let's find out. So we'll go into global config, router OSPF 1, router OSPF 1, and I'm going to say area 2 stub. And then let's jump onto router 4, and we're going to say configure terminal, router OSPF 1, area 2 stub. Oh, and I was actually redistributing from that do show run section OSPF. It's going to suppress it automatically, but I'll go ahead and I'll drop out the redistribute statement there. So we'll make it a pure stub. All right. So on router 4 now, when I say do show IP route, are we going to see that 172? We're not. However, I automatically receive a default route. So do I have reachability? Let's give that a try. 172.16.100.3. I do, because I have my default route here, because I'm a stub area, right? So it automatically generates an OSPF inter-area route for me. That's a default route. However, am I seeing the type 5s that I was seeing before? I'm not. Type 4s do show IP OSPF database. Let's see what the database shows. Pretty limited, right? And this is what I mean when I say that this is one of the reasons that you would use one of the stub area types for whatever the appropriate use case would be, is to shrink the size of that OSPF Link State database. Because take a look at this. I've got my type 3s and my type 1s, and that is it, right? Not a lot going on over here in area 2. All right, let's transition over to area 3 now, between router 5 and router 6. Let's turn this into an NSSA. So we'll go to global config, and I'm going to say router OSPF 1, and we'll say no redistribute connected. And then we're going to go ahead, or actually, let me leave that on there, redistribute connected. We'll say redistribute connected. I want to go ahead and leave that on, show run section OSPF, because we're going to make this an NSSA, right? So we want to be able to redistribute because we have external information that we want to put out there. And let's go ahead and say area 3 NSSA, and I'm going to jump on router 6 here, and we're going to do the same thing. So we're going to say conf t router OSPF 1 area 3 NSSA. All right, so we've changed area 3 to a not so stubby area. Area 2 is a stub area, and area 1 is a totally not so stubby area. So we're looking at area 3 here from router 6's perspective, and let's keep in mind that this is a not so stubby area. So what does that mean? We should see type 3s, but we're not going to see type 4s, and we're definitely not going to see type 5s. And what else are we not automatically going to receive from our ABR router 5? And let me go ahead and mark this up here. So this is my ABR on router 5. So what are we also not going to see? And that would be a default route, right? So let's type show IP route, and what do we have here? We see our type 3s, but again, no type 4s, no type 5s, and no default route. All right, so if I say show IP OSPF database, what do we have? We do have our type 7 though, right? So there's our type 7 entry. That is going to get flooded to the ABR, who's router 5. Let's see what router 5 shows. Do show IP route. And there is the ON2 for that 192.168, right? Because this is indicating it's a type 7. Remember that. That ON2 means it's seeing it as a type 7. But what's going to happen? Do show IP OSPF database. Look at the database real quick. And for area 3, there we are. There's my type 7, right? But what if I come all the way back over here to router 3 and say do show IP route? Now router 3 is a totally not so stubby area. So the totally not so stubby area says I'm not going to have any type 3s, type 4s, or type 5s. So when router 6 sent that type 7 up here to router 5, and then router 5 flooded it out to everybody else in the OSPF domain as a type 5, when it hits router 1 as a type 5, router 1 says, not so fast, I am a totally not so stubby area. I can't take your type 5. In fact, I can't take your type 4 or your type 3s, right? None of those are going to get picked up. So let's go over to the stub area. Does the stub area pick it up, which would be router 4? And based off of what we have there, do show IP route? Absolutely not. The stub area is not going to pick it up. The stub area is only interested in the type 1, type 2, and type 3s. He's not going to see type 4s, he's not going to see type 5s, and he's not going to see type 7s. So let's go ahead and wrap this up with a quick review, right? We talked about the stub. The stub area automatically generates a type 3 LSA default route for us, an inter-area default route. The stub area is not going to see type 4s, type 5s, or type 7s. And remember, it's not going to see type 7s because that's going to be an external source, and it can't be a stub and it can't be an ASBR and a stub, right? If it's an ASBR, it would have to be a NSSA or a Totally NSSA. So then we had the Totally stub, which still gives us that default route automagically. However, the Totally stub area says, not only can I also not see type 4, type 5, and type 7s, but I'm not going to allow type 3s into my area, right? So literally the Totally stub area is simply all I want is a default route. Then we looked at the Not-So-Stubby area, the NSSA, which said, you know what? I've got external routing information and sources I need to get into this OSPF area, so I'm going to be an NSSA. However, I'm not going to allow type 4s or type 5s into the area, right? Similar to the stub, except I'm allowing the NSSA is allowing type 7s in there. And then the one key point with the Not-So-Stubby area is the default route is not provided automatically for you. You've got to configure it with that default information originate statement, and it's got to be on the ABR. And then finally, we wrapped up the OSPF stub area introduction here with the Totally Not-So-Stubby area. And the Totally Not-So-Stubby area says that, yeah, I can do external routing sources, but I'm not going to allow in type 3s, type 4s, or type 5s. And I'm a little better than the Not-So-Stubby area because I'm going to go ahead and provide, by default, a type 3 inter-area default route, right? So the only OSPF area type that does not automatically generate a type 3 or generate a default route into the area, right, whether it's a stub, totally stub, not so stubby, or totally not so stubby area, is the NSSA, the not so stubby area. All three other area types are going to give you automatically a type 3 inter-area default route that can be used. All right, I really hope that that you've gotten a lot out of this. I hope that any confusion that you had about the different OSPF area types has been cleared up. I know that when I first started learning OSPF a while ago, that this was one of the things that just I could not seem to get my head around, was the different area, you know, the multi-area, and then, well, wait a minute, I'm doing multi-area, and now you're telling me that there's, you know, stub area types, and there's 4 different stub area types, and you've got all these different LSAs that are allowed, that aren't allowed. So again, hopefully I've broken this down into a digestible format for you, and you walk away with a much better and a much more clear understanding as to the different OSPF stub area types and which one you would want to use based off the appropriate use case. All right, well, I really appreciate you watching. Again, I hope that, that you find this valuable, and thanks for watching.